Um, Dr. Arvind Prasad has a PhD in material science from University of Alberta, Canada. He's a research fellow at University of Queensland, Australia. His interest lies in the study of India's history, in particular, the darshans of India, their role in shaping the Indian society, and India's contribution to the world, which he does in his spare time. Apart from the current paper in Swadeshi Indology, he has also performed a comparative study of fundamental arithmetic operations contained in early Indian mathematics and in Vedic mathematics of Shankaracharya Sri Bharati Krishna Tirthaji. He has presented his maths-related works at the World Sanskrit Conference in Bangkok 2015 and Vedic Math Conference in Kolkata in 2016.
It was quite exciting. When I first wrote this paper, it turned out to be quite big. And it's exciting to be here, and it's an honor to be presenting in front of eminent scholars here. I've taken it's about Sanskrit Cosmopolis. It's on chronology of Sanskrit Cosmopolis. But the approach I've taken is slightly different. And there will be a lot of keywords that Manogna and Meg just talked about. So there will be words like oppression and role of Buddhism, the Sanskrit Cosmopolis. So keep that in mind as I'm going through my presentation. It's a preliminary piece of work because I've spent last 6 months or so. There's obviously a lot more that needs to be done. I'll present this in 2 parts. The first part is the hypothesis of Pollock. Manogna and Meg, they gave a wonderful display of the inconsistencies. But I am taking a different point of view. I'm talking about the hypothesis that founds the basis for Pollock's works. And then I am trying to answer those hypotheses in terms of what the traditional scholars tell us. Is there a match between the two, between what he's saying and what the traditional scholars say? So my analysis is going to be beyond the Sanskrit Cosmopolis. So I'll walk you through my approach as we go along. So obviously Pollock is trying to recreate a picture of India, and he paints a pretty gloomy picture of India. And my paper is based on three papers that I've read of his. The Sanskrit Cosmopolis from 1996, India and the Vernacular Millennium, 300 to 1200 CE, and the Death of Sanskrit. And the entire summary of those 3 papers, this is my summary, is the perfection and the subsequent aesthetic appeal of Sanskrit language was deliberately developed by scholars, which is the Brahmins and Pandits, for the purpose of colonizing other regions at the behest of the Hindu kings. This is my take on what he's saying. Successful colonization attempts were carried out solely by using the power of the language, which is Sanskrit, and the consequent Sanskrit Cosmopolis. So what I'm saying is that he has used Sanskrit as a political tool. I mean, that's Pollock's views. And what he's saying is that the Brahmins and the kings, they colluded together, and they were successful in creating a Sanskrit cosmopolis. Not by the march of an army or religious crusade. So this is a key point, that he's saying Sanskrit, because it was used as a political language, they did not need a crusade or a military intervention to colonize. These regions, which is the Sanskrit cosmopolis as it has spread in Southeast Asia, it is oppressed by Sanskrit. These vernaculars then rose against it, and they defeated Sanskrit everywhere. I think he's mentioned this word, Sanskrit lost everywhere, in one of his papers. So that's the summary of the 3 articles that I have read. Now, the asserted theory or the asserted maxim is he creates a narrative, and then the facts are presented to fit that narrative. So in terms of, now I'm trying to get into where chronology comes in here. The narrative, which is the cause, is assigned, and then the facts are presented or interpreted to fit the assigned narrative. So there are certain Pollockian claims. So let's see what those claims are. The Hindu kings were power hungry, whose sole aim was to dominate the common populace. That's his hypothesis. There was a Brahmin, the Pandits and the king collusion. They came together to run this power machinery. And of course, Sanskrit was developed as a political tool to create a cosmopolis. Now, these are foundational hypotheses. So the way I looked at it was, if this hypothesis is true, then it does not have a time tag to it. It's beyond time. And because if it is beyond time, then I can look at his hypothesis and check his hypothesis against events that have happened in the last 100, 200 years. And that's what I have done. I don't really need to say this, but the corollary of this asserted maxim is, the naturally balkanized state of India. So what he's saying is, and this is from one of his papers, the Sanskrit Cosmopolis, the point of tracking the historical trajectory along which Sanskrit traveled in the 1,000-year period is to make social theoretical sense of it. Can we determine the conditions that enable this language to spread with such translocality, that's the word here, translocality, to become the means by which a whole world gave voice to a political vision? So he's basically saying that the Sanskrit Cosmopolis was created, and before that cosmopolis, the natural state of India was a broken India, balkanized India. All the regions were separate. So that's an idea that he is trying to, that's the narrative he's trying to give. Now, very quickly, the importance of chronology in modern social sciences and also in Pollock's work, there are two basic features in it. One is, there is a promise of science. So what I mean by that is, and it relates to this cause and effect correlation. So if I drop this, it's going to fall. The event is falling. The cause of that is the gravity. The cause has to be present before the event happens. So that's the linearity in the chronology. So that's what the promise of science is, and we'll see whether the promise is met or not. So the cause has to come before the event, and hence dating an event becomes critical, because to explain an event you have to find a cause, and the cause has to be before the event. So that's where the chronology comes in. And the popular method is in the social sciences is you take a timeline and you do this cause and event analysis, and which is what was questioned by Meg and Manogna in a very nice way. But I have taken a different approach. What I'm saying, like I've said before, is within a given timeline, examine the asserted causes and analyze their truth by studying the events beyond the timeline. So the Pollockian claims about the Hindu and Brahmin kings coming together to oppress, or their hunger for power, these are the asserted causes. This is the narrative of Pollock. But does it stand the test of time? That's the question I'm trying to answer. So again, just to look at the cause and effect, the cause and event sequence, the Hindu kings and Brahmins were power hungry. That's the maxim. It created a vertical strata in the society. So you have that vertical classification, oppression of Dalits and women. That's an interpreted event. Challenged by Buddhism, that comes next. To counter Buddhism, you have the rise of Sanskrit Cosmopolis. And once that happens, you have the vernacular uprising against the Sanskrit Cosmopolis, and the vernaculars that defeat Sanskrit, and there is death of Sanskrit. So this is the chain of events that he is really trying to tell us. That's his narrative. This paper challenges the Pollockian ideas contained in the red boxes. So I'm going to challenge 3 ideas from Pollock. One is the Hindu kings and Brahmins were power hungry. the vernacular uprising, and the death of Sanskrit. These are the three ideas of Pollock that I am going to challenge. So let's see. Now, Pollock has not said these things out of thin air. He has one of the things he has looked at is the epigraphy, the inscriptions. And the facts that he has presented is that the inscriptions are in temples. The narrative he's telling us is that, oh, look, it's under the Brahmin control. It's in the temples. Inscription has two parts. So the first part is the Prashasti, where the kings are praised, which is written in Sanskrit. And his narrative is, look, there is Brahmin and king collusion. They are coming together. The Prashasti is, what Pollock is saying is that the Prashasti is being used to elevate the king to a divinely status. The part two is of the inscription is common deeds. So, simple things like, oh, the king gave a piece of land to so and so, that's written in the vernacular. And what narrative he is trying to tell us is the Sanskrit domination of the vernaculars, that Sanskrit gives divinity to kings. The language of Sanskrit is used to elevate the king to a divine status, but common things, the daily mundane things are written in vernaculars, so Sanskrit elevates itself. That's his narrative. And language in inscription changes with time. So he has shown a set of inscriptions over a period of time where there is a change in the language. So there is more and more of the second part in inscriptions. And this is what he's saying is, oh, look, the vernacular is uprising. There is a revolt of the vernaculars because there is more and more of the common deeds in the inscriptions. And of course, then he talks about the death of Sanskrit Cosmopolis. Now, he is baffled by a few things too. Extent of Prashasti written have befuddled many Indologists, not just Pollock. There were French Indologists who were very surprised. Why are there so many Prashastis written? There is no military movement. So he is candid in admitting that I don't know why there is no center-periphery relationship. There is no power center. There is no religious movement like you see in Europe, the Crusades. So Pollock is saying we have these unanswered questions and we have the Cosmopolis, but how was it created? And he provides a solution to that, and that's his ingenuity. He's saying that Sanskrit must have been used as a political language, and it's ingenious because it answers all these questions. So the question is, are these narratives true? So let's look at that. So what I did was I looked at traditional writings of traditional scholars, two of them, Pandit Baldev Upadhyaya and Srivat Banwari. Pandit Upadhyaya was a very renowned scholar. He was a Padma Bhushan awardee in 1984. And he has written a lot of books, which I'll come to later on. But the book that I read, which provided a lot of answer to Pollock's claims, was in his book called Kashi ke Panditon ki Panditya Parampara. It's a 1200-page book. It's a very nicely written book, and all it does is give narratives, daily accounts of Pandits. He has given lineage of Kashi Pandits, the Kashi kings. He has talked about the movement of Pandits from Maharashtra to Kashi and from Tamil Nadu to Kashi and so on. So I've used that one book of his to respond to the three claims from Pollock, which is the Hindu kings and Brahmins were hungry, power hungry, vernacular uprising against Sanskrit Cosmopolis, and death of Sanskrit. So the first one, the question I'm asking is, were the Hindu kings and Brahmins really power hungry? So one of the things that Pandit Upadhyaya talks about in that book is the salient features of Kashi Pandits. And it's 6 or 7 pages of description. And the salient features are really very simple. Pursuit of knowledge was their prime vocation. And we saw that yesterday in the Vyakyartha Sadas, where you could see the amount of knowledge these guys have. That's their prime vocation. Humility and modesty. They were very humble, and this is not just him saying, not just Upadhyaya saying. There is let me see if I can get his name right. He's a German sorry, I can't remember the name, but it's a German scholar who has actually made a statement that we need to revive Sanskrit, not only because of the knowledge contained therein, but also the humility and modesty of these pandits is a sight to behold. And they used to live a life of great penance and austerity. And one of their daily practices, they had several daily practices, but one of the things was to teach students for free. Of course, they were supported by kings and rich people, not just the kings, rich people as well. But the point is they could become corrupt and, charge fees to students even if they were being supported by the kings. But the fact that they kept on teaching students for free is a great sign that they were really about gaining knowledge and disseminating the knowledge. It was not really about power. One of the things which I really would like to state here is these pandits, they would go out in the evening for a stroll with their students. And while going out, they would explain little details of how to do a Shastrartha. So they were training their students on how to do Shastrartha as well. So that I thought was really interesting. Now there are about 150 Brahmins or Pandits whose lives are explained in that book. I randomly chose 4. I'm not going to, it's in the paper, but I'm not going to go through this in details. But suffice to say that all these Pandits, they displayed the salient features. They were very focused on gaining knowledge. They were very humble and modest. They helped the common masses by giving free education. Some of these Pandits even knew Ayurveda, and they would treat people for free. So I won't go through this slide. So just to summarize, in terms of the salient features of the Pandits, you don't see any greed in them. They were very, well, like I said, they were very, they had a lot of tapasya. They did a lot of tapasya. And one of the things which I did not mention in the previous slide was, there was 2 or 3 of them which I looked at. These Pandits, they went across from Kashi to Maharashtra, to Punjab, to Gujarat. They would meet another Pandit from Tamil Nadu. So what the picture that emerges is these Pandits, they were moving across all of India very freely. So the whole idea of the vernaculars uprising against Sanskrit doesn't seem to hold true. And so, well, we'll look at that in a little more details. I'll skip this. It's basically the same that I've been saying. The second question I'm asking is, did Sanskrit really die? Now, these traditional scholars and Pandits, they wrote a lot of texts. So they were teaching, they would disseminate knowledge, and one of the ways to disseminate knowledge was they would write books and texts. They were writing books in Hindi as well as Sanskrit. So, and this is all happening in 19th century, 20th century. All of this is happening in the 19th and 20th century. So if Sanskrit was dead, surely those Pandits wouldn't have been writing in Sanskrit. There was a Sanskrit college run by the British in Calcutta. This is late 19th century, so 1890s or something. So it was initiated by the British, but the actual people who were teaching in those colleges were the Pandits. So if Sanskrit was dead, there wouldn't have been any Pandits to be able to teach Sanskrit in those colleges. So this notion of Sanskrit having been dead, it doesn't hold at all. And and Baldev Upadhyaya, he talks about, Sanskrit Pracharak Vidwan. So there were these Vidwans whose sole job was to go around spreading Sanskrit. This is all happening at the grassroots level. I've given some names of people who did these kind of work. I don't need to go through that in this presentation. Uprising of the vernaculars, that's the third question I'm asking. Did the vernaculars really revolt against Sanskrit? Now, in the examples that I mentioned, but I did not go through in details, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. Datya Swami, his name, Datya is a small town in Madhya Pradesh. And Datya Swami, he grew up in Kashi, he was educated in Kashi. He moved from Kashi to different regions, ended up being in Madhya Pradesh in Datya. Kavindracharya Saraswati, very interesting example because Pollock knows about Kavindracharya Saraswati. He talks about the library that Saraswati had, but he dismisses it as, it must have been because Shah Jahan gave him money. Now, Kavindracharya Saraswati's story is interesting because he was the top scholar during the time of Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan had imposed a pilgrimage tax on the Hindu pilgrims. And Kavindracharya Saraswati, he walked 600 kilometers from Kashi to Agra just to plead the case against this pilgrimage tax. And he was so forceful that Shah Jahan agreed and he removed the tax, and he was so impressed with Kavindracharya's scholarship that he started giving him 2,000 rupees a month. And Pollock has made a statement saying, his library would have been because he used the money from Shah Jahan. But what Baldev Upadhyaya clearly says is he gave, Kavindracharya Saraswati gave up every single rupee that he had to the poor along the banks of Ganga. So clearly, he was not using the donation money for the library. So another nice example of how Pollock makes a statement, but the basis is not there. He's just made a statement. A couple of other examples, Raja Bhoj of Ujjain helped rebuild the Dwarka, and Rani Ahilya, who was not from Kashi, helped the king of Kashi to rebuild the Kashi Vishwanath temple. So again, there is synergy between different vernaculars. I don't see how the vernaculars were revolting against Sanskrit. I'll skip this. So there were a few things which I thought they were errors in Pollock's analysis. One is Prashasti writing. With my little bit of work on the mathematics, I know the Prashasti has been written amongst Indian mathematicians as well. So it's not just the Brahmins writing Prashasti for the kings. The other thing that came out of Baldev Upadhyaya's book is that Prashastis were written for Duke of Edinburgh and Queen of Victoria and the Dutch kings as well. So it was not just the Hindu kings they were writing Prashastis for. So the point I am trying to make is that it was not a tool to elevate the kings to a divinely status, writing Prashasti. Prashasti was written to honor and respect a person with some accomplishment. The second point is what it's called the file drawer problem, which the previous presentation came out very nicely, is you have a hypothesis, you collect the data, whatever data suits you, you present that. Whatever data does not suit you, you put it in the file drawer. That's why it's called a file drawer problem. And it's true, actually. It's actually true. And so what that tells us is that you have to look at what Pollock is not writing. Probably that is more important. What is he omitting from his analysis? And like I gave you the example of Kavindracharya Saraswati's 600-kilometer walk and the donation from Mughal emperor, he has not talked about those at all. So the question really is the promise of science. Where is the science? Where is the rigor in the analysis? And the Sanskrit and vernacular tussle, there were Pandits who were from Tamil Nadu and Andhra and Karnataka. They would teach in Sanskrit and Hindi in the school, but at home they would speak their vernacular language. So it was not as if they were fighting against each other, and they thought Sanskrit to be an oppressive tool. So I just quickly want to tell the traditional view what Baldev Upadhyaya has talked about, what India was. What was the picture of India, what has been the basis of Indian society from a traditional point of view. Bharat has been a tapovan of tyaga and tapas. And the sole aim has been to maintain a land of tyaga and tapas. That tapovan is a place where people can pursue knowledge. That's the traditional view. And because I've run out of time, I'm just going to mention this, that if you apply this as a philosophy, you can explain all the events that you see, the movement of Sanskrit across different places, the Pandits helping the students for free, the kings helping the Pandits. All of these can be explained by this traditional point of view that India has been a place of tyag and tapas in pursuit of knowledge. Just one last thing. I'll quickly end here by saying, given that Pollock's analysis has been inconsistent, it is important, as a way forward, it is important that we give a lot of attention to our traditional scholars. In my personal experience in the last day and a half, I have realized that the scholars who are steeped in the tradition, their responses have been really good. And as a way forward, I think we need to do serious scholarship reading the traditional scholars to understand what India has been and where we would like to take India forward. So with that, I'll stop and I'll take any questions.
I think you forgot, and as well as Pollock, to talk about traditions in Mithila, where in fact we see a fine synergy between Sanskrit and vernacular. The finest example is Vidyapati himself, the one who, despite knowing, I think, excellent Sanskrit, Desil Baina Sabjan Mitha, he starts writing extensively in Mathili for the, so that Jan Unmukhi in fact, experiment of Vidyapati is something which tells us that always the vernacular and Sanskrit is not juxtaposed to each other. This is what I think you said. Another point which I would like to make, that Shankar, taking a case from Mithila, Shankar Mishra and Ayachi Mishra. In fact, if we look at their life histories, the kind of stiff opposition which they had offered to the king, to the contemporary dispensation, is something, really remarkable in a sense that where the king is basically drawn into a conflict where he gives Shankar Mishra a very expensive, in fact, some kind of jewelry, which Ayachi Mishra is wondering that what would he do with this jewelry, and then ultimately it goes to a woman who is Chaman by caste, what we call the woman who aids us in giving birth, and there is a fine story of how this woman also abdicates that wealth because she thinks that all her skill would go waste if she basically engages in that wealth. So anti-market mechanism and this collusion between the Brahmin class and in fact kings, the Kshatriya and Brahmin, is in fact has a lot of fissures. If you look at several stories, look at story of Mithila, again I'll take sure. In fact, darshan, out of 6 astic darshans, 4 are from Mithila. Look at the way people are trained there by their gurus. Minimum of expenses, they are not charged at all. And these Nyay, Mimamsa, in fact 4 of the darshans flourished in Mithila without any aid. Not only from the kings, also with I think severe austerity and extreme renunciation by all these Brahmin Pandits, and which only got exhausted. I think Ganganath Jha writes till 1910. We had 1100 Mimamsaks in Mithila. So I think British, as if we are talking of chronology, the colony had a massive role to play. I do not know whether Pollock talks about that or not. Why did Mithila? He
dismisses. I mean, he doesn't talk about the influence of he avoids talking about the influence of Muslims and British in the disruption.
No, because till 1910 we had Mimamsaks.
Talks about it and says that you're not supposed to.
Sorry.
Regarding Muslims, he is very clear in the Death of Sanskrit. He says that it is absolutely false to attribute any
Yes,
responsibility
true.
to them.
Yes,
and he goes
yes,
on saying
yes.
that some of the Muslims actually try to help
Yes,
revive
yes.
Sanskrit, but the
Yeah,
Hindus
yeah.
did not want to cooperate.
Yeah. He's talking about King Harsha and yeah.
So yes, I mean,
So just to respond to your comments, Baldev Upadhyaya has only talked about the Kashi Pandits. So because I have only read that book, my responses are only about Kashi, but I think the general picture that I got was, it would have been the same in other parts of India as well.
it has been a seat of 4, out of 6 Aztec darshans, 4 grew in Mithila, and it is always being omitted by whosoever, I would not like to name. So that's actually, it keeps wondering me that why is there a conscious attempt not to study those darshans which were flourishing in Mithila, and it's today it's nowhere. Recently we were trying to read Nyay, the tradition of Nyay and Navya Nyay through vernacular proverbs. We had something in our mind that how does it survive? So in fact, to look into the survival and existence of those Nyay traditions, we were trying to look into proverbs and several vernacular traditions. In fact, there was no support at all from no murmur. In fact, one of the guy I would not name in the office, he asked me that what is the validity of Nyay?
Yeah,
so these are the questions which you face.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Like I said in the beginning, this was a preliminary study. There's a lot more to study and answer these questions. And yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate on your own data.
Sure.
Okay, so you say that Brahmins and other people led this life of renunciation, sacrifice, and so on. But in your own data, you have the instance of Peshwas, who are Brahmins who would be king, right? So, how dominant is this theme versus that theme?
How dominant? The general idea was that the kings would support the Brahmins for their studies. And those support would come not only from the Kashi kings, but also from Nepal or Peshwa in your question. So I've not looked at, the numbers in terms of, how many kings supported and so no, I have not looked at data, but yeah.
So based from my data,
Sure.
there is, I think, plenty of data from 1820. Plenty of data, particularly from 1822 to 38, actually, which Dharampalji has collated from British archives, which shows the about 45 to 85%, depending on which district and which part of India you're looking at, where students actually studying in Hindu schools often held in Brahmins' houses and temples, which were all actually Shudras and caste below. So, I think that is an extraordinary. It covers more than 50% of the population.
To help me, you can do 2 things. You can go to the subscribe button on my YouTube and subscribe. We need more subscribers there. Secondly, I get lots of emails on people saying, how do we donate? How can we help you? You go to rajivmalhotra.com or you go to infinityfoundation.com and you can hit the donate button. You can donate in dollars. There are different ways mentioned. If you want to donate in rupees, there is a column called Infinity Foundation India, and you click that and there are instructions on how you can donate in India.